Hey everybody, this is James. Welcome back to Comics and Carbonite. Today we're going to get to our first official Star Wars comic review of the channel. This is Star Wars Darth Vader Annual 2. This is an offshoot of the regular Darth Vader series, which is a current ongoing. I think they're up to, I think issue 19 is coming out next week. So it's been out about a year and a half or so. And if you haven't checked out the regular Darth Vader series, you definitely want to do so. If you're a Star Wars fan, if you're a Darth Vader fan, if you're just a fan of good Marvel comics, which unfortunately seems to be a very rare thing these days. You definitely want to check that out. The regular Darth Vader series might be my favorite Marvel comic book that's out right now, right next to Marvel 2-in-1 by Chip Zdarsky. The two of those comics I absolutely love, and I think they're the best thing that Marvel's putting out right now. Darth Vader is actually better, I think, than the regular Star Wars ongoing with Luke and Leia and Han and all of those characters. So definitely want to check that out. Just like the regular Darth Vader series, Darth Vader Annual 2 bridges the gap, or helps to bridge the gap between the original prequel uh, after Revenge of the Sith and, to Part 4, A New Hope, Rogue One, and so forth. And speaking of Rogue One, if you're a Rogue One fan, you definitely want to check out this particular issue of Darth Vader because it has a lot to do with Rogue One. It involves Tarkin, Krennic, and the construction of the Death Star, which Rogue One was primarily involved with. So, at any rate, Darth Vader Annual 2 features writing by Chuck Wendig and art by Leonard Kirk. If you haven't read this issue already, if you don't want spoilers, you might want to dip out now because I'm going to be going through pretty much everything in the book. So, Chuck Wendig, he wrote the Aftermath series of Star Wars books, which connects, or I should say, bridges the gap between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. I think there's three of them. I could be wrong about that. I was going to read all of them. I tried reading the first book. I don't even remember the name of it. I think it's Cataclysm, but I could be wrong about that. But it was the first book in the Aftermath series. I tried reading it. I got about 50 pages into it, and I just couldn't go on. I'm going to try to read it again at some point, but it was quite the letdown, honestly. It was a lot of side characters which weren't very interesting, and I thought the writing was pretty bad. The style was very odd. Um, yeah, it just didn't get me involved in the story at all, and I just dipped out. So, having said that, I was really pleasantly surprised by how good this issue was. By Chuck Wendig. So, at any rate, let's start with the cover here. Covers by Mike Diodato Jr., who is a fantastic artist. Some people don't like static shots of characters. I don't mind them at all, especially when it's something as beautiful as this. When I first looked at it on the stands, it didn't stand out that much, but I think that has more to do with just the overall lackluster covers that Marvel's putting out, how dull they appear due to the paper stock, because the cover is now just like the interior. It's the same paper stock. There's nothing that pops out. There's no colors that pop out on it. It's just very dull. A lot of times you know the ink gets off on your fingertips, or you see your fingerprints on the cover. Marvel really needs to be doing something about this, because it's all of their books just appear so dull on the stands, even though this is a spectacular cover once you get into it. I mean, just look at how beautiful that is. That is a really nice cover, and it really deserves a better showcase with with more vibrant colors, and it would really pop out on a better cover stock. So but at any rate, it's a beautiful cover. I'm thinking about even putting this up on my wall. It's so nice. But At any rate, again, we're getting into spoilers here, so if you haven't read the issue, you might want to dip out here. So the story begins with basically there's a saboteur that is sabotaging the construction of the Death Star. It has a lot to do again with the construction of the Death Star and Tarkin, his involvement with this. The thing that I thought was so interesting about this story, to begin with, is how much you see that Vader hates Tarkin. When I first saw A New Hope, one of the interesting things about Vader was that as powerful as he was, as great a villain as he was, maybe the best villain you'd ever seen in your life, one of the interesting things about him was that he still served a master. And it wasn't just the Emperor, it was Tarkin. You could tell he was subservient to Tarkin, and that Tarkin was leading this whole thing on the Death Star. Um, I really liked that idea that as powerful as Vader was, even he had to serve someone. So, but the thing that I thought was interesting was, when I first saw A New Hope, even though I didn't think that, Vader and Tarkin were best friends, I thought there was, some sort of, I don't want to say camaraderie, but I didn't think that it was, some kind of a struggle between the two. But as you can see here, they clearly hated one another, especially Vader for Tarkin. I'm not even sure if Tarkin really hates Vader as much as he just, knows that Vader hates him and he's going to use Vader however he has to. Vader even has these, revenge fantasies of eliminating Tarkin. And the interesting thing is that Tarkin knows it, and that despite all that, Tarkin is not afraid of him at all. Um, Even though Vader is clearly the more threatening physical presence, Tarkin has the psychological edge over Vader, and it makes for a really interesting dynamic here. So I really like that a lot, and they really explore that here. And that basically the Emperor is putting Vader in his place, telling him that, while you're working for me, you're also working for Tarkin. So really nice stuff there. Uh, we see that uh, Vader meets for the first time ever Krennic, who, if you checked out Rogue One, you'll know him from that. But this is where Vader and Krennic first meet. Krennic is trying to throw Tarkin under the bus, basically, and accuse him of being the saboteur. One of the things I really liked is that even though Krennic and Tarkin are trying to set each other up, it's quite clear that while they're both jockeying for power and position, they wouldn't betray the Empire this way. And I really like that idea. Vader even goes to check on Galen Erso, which, again, if you've checked out Rogue One, you know who that is. Jen Erso's father, and he's the primary planner for the uh, Death Star, basically the, guy who's setting up the laser and a lot of the, structure and so forth, and how the laser will work. And so again, getting into massive spoilers here. So we find out at one point towards the end that the actual saboteurs are the Geonosian hive, like we saw on Attack of the Clones. And there's even a point in the issue where, I think it's back here actually, where Vader reminisces or remembers back on the arena scene in Attack of the Clones. And I thought that was a nice panel here. But when Vader finds out that it's the hive that are the saboteurs, he basically goes in and just takes them out. I mean, brutally takes them out. And then, what I really loved more than anything about this issue was the wrap up and the end scenes with Vader and Tarkin. One of the things that I sort of subconsciously picked up on as a kid, although I obviously couldn't articulate it until much later, was one of the themes of New Hope was, sort of the idea of technology and what massive technology does to us as humans, how it dehumanizes us. And Vader is obviously a metaphor for that. We saw at the very beginning of New Hope when the small rebel ship flies overhead and then the massive Star Destroyer flies overhead. We see in that moment, we see in the Death Star, basically the ascension of massive technology and what that does, how it dehumanizes, how it destroys humanity, and the rebellion. Even though they use technology as well, they use it as a tool for good. Whereas Vader is a metaphor for it, the technological side overtaking us and dehumanizing us. So one of the things where that idea, I should say, is addressed here, and basically Tarkin accuses Vader of one point of the reason that Vader doesn't like the Death Star is that once the Death Star rises to ascension, that he will no longer be the technological weapon of the Empire. He will no longer be the biggest weapon that the Empire wields. Now, while that's a easily understandable route to take, or an idea that you can take with this, that's one thing I disagreed with in the book. I never saw Vader's dislike of the Death Star as being something like, oh, it's going to overtake me, and now everybody will see that as the big terror that the Empire wields. I never saw it like that. I just saw it as, here's a man who believes in a religion, a way of life. He believes in the Force. He believes in what the Force can accomplish. And to him, any technology is inferior to the power of the Force. And it's why I think Vader is such a self-loathing creature, because he goes from a person who believes in the Force and still does, but now he has to rely on technology to keep him alive. And to him, I always thought that the Death Star was just an extension of the technology that he despises, and even though he despises it, he has to rely on it. So I always saw it as more that sort of a thing, and he just sees it as, no technology can measure up to this thing that can accomplish so much, that this force which binds the universe together. And so I always saw it in that manner. But it's easy to understand why Wendig would take this tack, and it's not a terrible line of thinking to take. I just didn't quite agree with it. So, but still, it's a really good scene between Vader and Tarkin, and it wraps up with a scene which, not directly, but kind of alludes to the beginning of Rogue One. Has this nice scene with this Death Star droid self-destructing, and Jyn Erso's mom basically realizing that, okay, we've got to go on the run, and which somewhat leads into Rogue One, where they're in hiding and Krennic finds them. But at any rate, as I said, this is a great issue. It is a little pricier than your normal issue. It's $4.99. And it does have more pages of content. I think it's about 31, 32 pages. And it is definitely worth the $5. If you're a Vader fan, if you're a Star Wars fan, you definitely want to check this out. My biggest complaint, as I said, is more the packaging of it. The dull covers. The issue, even though it is an annual, appears rather flimsy. It used to be, when an annual would come out when I was a kid, it had a really meaty feel to it. It felt really thick, and you knew, even though you were paying more money, that it was really going to be worth it. I have to say, when I picked this up off the stands, paying $5 for it, I almost thought about putting it back just for that that matter alone, and that it just didn't feel, meaty. It didn't feel like it had any weight to it. It's just very flimsy, but still, it's a really solid book. Art wise, I'm not the biggest fan of Leonard Kirk, but it is still solid artwork, and along with the writing, it makes for a nice, solid piece of Star Wars entertainment. So if you're looking for a good Star Wars comic, this is definitely one to check out. So yeah, give it a try. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe. I hope you come back for more reviews, and hopefully we will see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.